Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my November 2025 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. I'm going to start with my nerdy hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. Also, I put chapter markers in all of my videos, so if you need to skip over anything, although I don't really do spoilers, or if you need to go back to anything to figure out what was the name of that again, all of that is down below. While you're checking out the description box, make sure that you're subscribed because sometimes YouTube likes to unsubscribe people just for funsies, and why not leave a like while you're at it. As a reminder, I will also be updating my bingo board from hell at the end of the video and letting you know what I read for Read Queer all year. In October, I read 20 books for a total of 5,463 pages. That takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so about 3,061 of those pages were actually about 88 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books was 15 adult books, 4 YA books, and 1 middle grade book. I read 12 novels, 4 anthologies, 2 short stories, 1 novella, and 1 graphic novel. This month the biggest chunk of what I read was horror and contemporary, followed by fantasy, nonfiction, mystery thriller, sci-fi, and romance. If you adjust by page count, the graph changes in a few of those genres quite a bit. Almost all of these were from the library, but I did read some that were free online and 1 from NetGalley. I read 11 audiobooks, 5 hardcovers, 3 paperbacks, and 1 ebook. Most of these were in the 200 to 399 page range, and most were from this decade. In terms of the genders of authors, it was overwhelmingly women, although things were more mixed when it came to the genders of protagonists. In terms of setting, just under half were set in the US, but I also had books set in Mexico, Ireland, Australia, other worlds, the UK, and Canada. In terms of diversity of subject matter, about half of these were queer, a chunk were intersectional, some were translated or feminist, but about a quarter had no discernible diversity to speak of. In terms of star ratings, this month I had 3 3-star reads, 7 3.5-star reads, 4 4-star reads, 5 4.5-star reads, and 1 5-star read. Let's start with our lowest rated read and work our way up to the highest, shall we? And I'm changing my order on the fly because of a situation I'm going to tell you about as soon as I've updated this, so that my description won't be wrong. So this hasn't really happened before, but the first book on this list is one I've never actually talked about on my channel, and I say that because usually by the time we get to the monthly wrap-up, I've talked about these books in a weekly wrap-up. It doesn't always work out that way, it depends on when the first of the month lands, that type of thing, but I specifically haven't talked about this book yet because I forgot to write it down in the week that I read it, so I didn't talk about it. I finished it about the mid of the month, and it wasn't until I was putting together my graphics that I went, oh, I don't actually have this cover yet, which means I haven't talked about this book yet. That's awkward. The book in question is The Floating Hotel. This book takes place on a giant cruise ship of sorts, but it cruises through space, not through the oceans on Earth. And we're following several different people that either work on this cruise ship or are passengers on this cruise ship. It does function like a giant floating hotel, but in my mind I just can't stop thinking of it as a cruise ship because it's a hotel that moves. There are a bunch of different things going on with characters, such as we know that the manager of this hotel actually started like 40 years ago when he first got to the ship as a teenager because he was running away from his home life. And then there's other people on the ship that have similar backstories, or backstories at least where they were trying to get away from things and now they work on this ship. And this is one of those books where it's pretty much vibes. Vibes are what you're going for. All the stories kind of connect and come together, but there's all these different little things that you're like, but why is this part of this story? Is this all going to come together in a satisfying way? For me, it personally didn't. It was fine though. If you like something that's very vibes based and you want it set in space and you want some queer characters where there's like that little bit of representation of queer characters, sure. There's also disability rep, and I feel like one of the people who was disabled was also queer, which is why I actually picked up this book. I picked it up for Read Queer all year. But it's like a very sliver of representation. You kind of have to squint at it to be like, I don't know for sure because I don't think it's said directly in the text, but I'm pretty sure this person is queer, and also they do have a disability, so we'll go with it. Oh, peppermint mocha, you're good. The next book on my 3-star list is The Empress of Salt and Fortune. This one is a very short one, and it's kind of framed in an interesting way because we have this person, I think that they were a cleric, they worked for a monastery in any case, or some form of religious order, and they're going to go see something in the capital, but on the way there they find this person living on the way and they kind of stay with this person, and she is affectionately called grandmother because she is an older woman, and she starts telling this person's stories. And eventually these stories become very, very relevant, but regardless of that, they are very interesting because it turns out that she used to actually be a servant to an empress, which in itself is quite fascinating. But things aren't just as simple as that, and there are some reveals near the end of it. This was fine. It didn't really capture my attention, mostly because there's a lot of political machinations, and that's really just not my thing that I really enjoy reading about. But the language use was beautiful and the story was interesting. My other 3-star read is Fleishman is in Trouble. This one is about a doctor named Toby Fleishman. He has asked his wife for a divorce. They have 2 kids, and he is just going through it because she didn't really want to grant the divorce. She works all the time, so she neglects the kids, and they're constantly fighting about that. They have 2 separate apartments now in New York, and she's been a social climber for a really long time, so they've been spending a lot of money, which means that she just works harder and harder and harder, and she looks down on his job as a doctor, which is just absurd, honestly. The weird thing about this book is it's narrated by one of his old college friends, and we do eventually learn her name. I think it was Libby, and we do learn more about her, but the thing that doesn't really make this successful for me is there's a lot of conversations that she is talking about that she would not have been privy to, or like inner thoughts that he's having about all of these women that are flooding his phone on dating apps who definitely want to do him. And I'm just like, I know you guys are close, or at least you become close again after this breakup of your marriage, but I don't think you'd be telling her all of the intimate details of everything you want to do or did with these various women. This is very much the type of book where I was really waiting for something to happen, and you do kind of get a reveal of what's going on because eventually the wife does disappear. But again, very, very character driven and not plot driven, and I'm guessing I'm more of a plot person. On to my 3.5 star reads, the first one being Squad. This is about a girl who goes to a new high school, falls in with this group of friends, and then finds out that they are all werewolves, and on the full moon every month they must feast. And now that she knows that they're werewolves, she either has to join them or they have to kill her. The art in this graphic novel is absolutely beautiful. I saw the relationship coming a mile away, and the way that they resolved this was also interesting. Other than that, not too much to say. Next we have Eat the Ones You Love, which is a Little Shop of Horrors retelling set in the north side of Dublin. I personally lived on the south side of Dublin, so the whole time they were talking about the shopping centre, I could only picture Dundrum Shopping Centre because that's where I worked. And I'm okay with that because I don't need to know exactly what the actual shopping centre looks like because I'm picturing one in Dublin, it's fine. Although I was very into a Little Shop retelling, this one did some things that made it less successful than the original, in that we are told that this plant has eaten a bunch of people, and we do see that in flashback, but I think that if you're going for a Little Shop retelling, you're kind of wanting to see that on the page. And it takes a very long time for anything like that to happen. There were a few times though where I stopped and went, is that a musical reference to a different musical? Which I also enjoyed. Because I have the connection to where this was set, I enjoyed it because of that. I enjoyed some of the dynamics of the relationships, although a lot of this was way more about, will this bisexual woman pick this person or this person, instead of, hey, there is a man-eating plant. Maybe we should focus on that. Next we have a short story collection called The Houseguest and Other Stories. These are all set in Mexico and they all have a really creepy undertone. For example, the titular story is about this houseguest that the father of the family says can move into their house, but he's always away, and the mother and the daughter are always there being like, this guy is super creepy, we really don't want him here, and how that escalates. There were somewhere between 10 and 13 stories in this, and they were all pretty enjoyable. Next on the short story train, I listened to an audio recording of The Raven, because this is one of those poems that I kind of know what it's about because, you know, I've watched The Simpsons Halloween specials before, but I had never actually listened to this poem in full, so I decided it was finally time to do that, and I was mostly impressed by him being able to keep up that rhyming scheme, because it was not an easy rhyming scheme. I also honestly picked this up because there was a quest on Pagebound that had this as one of the books for the quest, and it was very easy to just tick this off because it's like a 15-minute recording at tops. And this is one of those things where I get more out of it by listening to it than by reading it on the page myself, so that's how I did it. Next we have Ready When You Are, which is the North American title for The Boy from the Mish. This is set in Australia, it's an Australian book. I don't know why they changed the title for North America. That's really frustrating actually, because I'd been wanting to read The Boy from the Mish for ages, didn't realize I could do that because I couldn't find that book here in North America, and it's just because they changed the title. This is about an Aboriginal boy who lives in the Mish. It's around the holidays, Christmas time, so summer vacation for them, and his aunt and all his cousins are going to come visit him and his little brother and his his mom, but then they also bring along this other guy who recently got out of juvie and is staying with his aunt. During this time frame, he's going out to a lot of parties with his friends and also with his girlfriend, but then his girlfriend ends up breaking up with him, and it turns out he's never actually been able to perform while they've been trying to fool around, and then he kind of seems to figure out maybe that's because I like boys. And maybe I particularly like that boy who's been sleeping on my bedroom floor for this holiday. It's a coming of age story, it's a queer story, it's about him realizing this about himself but also being fearful of sharing it because it's not widely accepted where he lives. Not to mention he also gets crap from the white people around because he's Aboriginal and people are racist. So, you know, adding another minority on top of that one doesn't feel like the best thing in the world, but also he wants to be able to live authentically. Next we have Everything She Does Is Magic. This one is set in a town where all of October is Halloween and there are so many different events. And one of our main characters is the daughter of this couple who owns the paint shop in town, and they are the head of the committee that makes this whole town Halloween all during October. Basically all of the small shops in this little town make about half of their yearly profit in October. However, much like the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus, she feels like witches are just a thing that the town talks about as being real, but they can't possibly be real. Our other point of view character is a witch. She leads an interesting life because in her coven she actually kind of moves around to different family members. So she doesn't live with her parents full time, she kind of moves around to these different family members, and she's currently living with an aunt who lives in this same town. And she's getting closer and closer and closer to when she should be joining the coven, which is, I believe, her 18th birthday. However, she needs to find a human to be her protector before she can do that, and she hasn't been able to do that, so she feels like she's not going to be able to join the coven, which means she's going to get excommunicated, which means that she's going to have to start a whole new life without her powers and without her family. She's in a little bit of a bind because she actually told her parents that there's this girl at school that will totally be her protector, and of course it's the first point of view character. However, these characters have never actually talked before, so that's a problem. And then also you're not really supposed to fall in love with your protector, and yeah, there's definitely feelings there. So, you know, a little messy, but it's also Halloween-y, good fun times. This one was very sweet, I enjoyed it, and there is a sequel coming up following one of the background characters, so I'm interested to read that as well. Finally, for my 3.5 star reads, we have The Lamb. This one is about a character who we see grow up. We kind of meet her when she's about 5 or so, and we see her go through life up until the point where she's probably in her early teens, maybe she's a tween, she does get her period, so kind of that age. And her life is very different, I hope, from all of ours, because she lives in the woods with her mother. All of that is fine so far. However, their major source of nutrition is killing and eating people, which is where I hope we all differ. This seems normal to her because she's grown up with this as a fact of life. However, her mom, you know, does tell her not to tell other people about it. Her dad ran off a really long time ago. And then one day she tries to bring what they call a stray home so that she can provide for her little family. But her mom takes a liking to this one and shacks up with her instead, which definitely turns the opinion of the mother-daughter relationship. There was a point in this story where I kind of figured out the significance of the title of it, and I went, oh, okay, this is gonna be even darker than I thought. Because obviously, it's disgusting. We're talking about people eating people. But it gets very complex and even more dark things happen. On to my 4-star reads, the first one being The Telltale Heart. Yes, I read another thing by Edgar Allan Poe this month. Because in my household, we celebrate Triple October, which means September through November is all spooky season. Also, this was another one on a page-bound quest. And it was just very easy to get another badge after listening to Christopher Lee tell me this story on YouTube. This is another one that's kind of in the popular mind enough that I knew what was going to happen. It's about somebody who kills somebody, buries them under the floorboards, and then keeps hearing the beating heart, and that kind of gives them away. But it was really interesting to actually hear this performed because you actually have this character who has something going on mental health-wise, and that was exemplified very well by this performance. You can find recordings of both of these works on YouTube, and I highly recommend listening to them because I think that's the best way to consume Edgar Allan Poe. Specifically the works thereof, not his flesh, because it's been gone for a really long time, and also I'm vegan, so like, no. I like that I didn't say I'm not a cannibal, I went right to vegan. Next we have I'm Afraid of Men. This is a short essay collection about Vivek Shraya's life and why specifically she is afraid of men. On top of the whole patriarchy of it all, she is a trans woman, so that definitely plays into it. And then at the very end of this, we also find out why she's particularly afraid of women, which, yup, that tracks. I've read works by this author before, enjoyed them, figured I would enjoy this, and I was correct. Next we have My Lovely Wife, and this is about a husband and wife, and they have 2 kids, and they have this very lovely suburban home and life together, but it's definitely darker under the surface. As we come to find out, this husband and wife like to kidnap women together and do things to them. And this particularly becomes a problem when the body of one of their victims is found. However, we are getting the perspective of the husband, and as far as he knows, that victim died like a year ago. But it comes out in the media that when this body was found, she had only been dead for a few weeks, so he's wondering what his wife's been doing all this time. This is one of those interesting ones where you're not really rooting for anyone because they're all bad, but because you're in the perspective of this one character, you're kind of like, how is he going to get out of this situation? Is he making it better? Is he covering his tracks? Is everything going to be okay? And yeah, you're gonna have to read it to find out yourself because I'm not going to tell you. And finally, we have Love Lives Here. This is a memoir about a parent whose middle child came out as a trans girl, and then a little bit later, whose partner came out as a trans woman. I actually went into this with a little bit more context than that because as I was logging this book in the places where I'm like, hey, I'm reading this book, now I finished this book, like Pagebound and Goodreads, I noticed that the author's name was different. So I looked up the author, and it turns out that the author has also transitioned. But that was after the publication of this book. So going through, it's kind of like I have spoilers in my own mind and going, oh, he doesn't know yet that he's the dad, but he's gonna find out eventually, and that's just kind of fun. This family is from Ontario, and this author was actually writing mommy blog content before their middle child came out and was going to stop blogging altogether until the child was like, actually, you can talk about me on your blog. I think it's great. I need there to be more representation out there, and I couldn't really find much while I was researching this stuff by myself at age 11. So this family became activists for the cause, which was great. And then also you get to see this person going through the situation of a child coming out, but then also a spouse coming out, which is 2 very different situations. I would also love a follow-up because this was published in 2019, and obviously their family structure has changed even more since then. On my 4.5 star reads, the first one being Camp QUILTBAG. This is about 2 different characters who are going to the same queer camp for children, and both of them are going for different reasons. However, they end up interacting. One of them is more confident than the other, so E decides that E will help her with her confidence. Well, she is going to help M get more points for Air Cabin so that cabin can win this big prize. This pact is a little bit convoluted, so obviously they get found out at some point and people are kind of hurt that they lied about things, but also they get to talk about the reasons why they don't really trust people, and they get to make new friends, and it's just lovely. I love seeing characters of this age having their normal messy social dynamics, but then getting over certain things, getting closer to people, realizing that your friends back home who are no longer your friends because you came out don't count for much, and that you have new friends, and that's great. Next we have My Roommate from Hell. This is all about a character who is going off to university for the first time, and it turns out that his roommate at university is literally the Prince of Hell. A little while previous to this, we found out that hell is actually a different dimension, and this is the first time there's kind of a cultural exchange. So somebody from this university is going to hell for a semester, and the Prince of Hell is studying at this university in the States. So on top of the fact that he's now living with a celebrity who many people don't actually want to have on Earth, because they think that hell is what people who are fans of the Bible actually think of as hell, when really it's just a different dimension. So it's not like he's the devil or anything, but people think that he is. But he also has these magic powers to kind of deflect them, so that's fun. But additionally, because he is a prince and he hasn't really had to do certain things for himself before, he doesn't keep his side of the room clean. There's other things that he does that are just super annoying. And it really comes down to these different dynamics between people who are being roommates with each other for the first time, but also there's some attraction there. And we also get a dating of convenience storyline at one point as well, which is a little bit fun, honestly. It's messy, it's queer, it's hot because, you know, hell, and it's fun. Speaking of messy, queer, and hot, we can move on to Dream On Ramona Riley. This one is set in a very small town that's in the same universe as Bright Falls, but it's not the same small town. I think it's called Clover Lake, and there is a little bit of crossover, which I really enjoyed seeing this character cameo in this book. But our titular character is Ramona Riley. She works at this coffee shop, and she's been helping to raise her little sister because her mother just completely left the family 18 years ago. And soon after she went off to college, her dad actually had an accident and really needed help raising her younger sister, his daughter. So she came back, never went back to college, but now her younger sister is about to go off to college, which is just so amazing, and she's got these like motherly feelings about it. Their small town is going to be the setting for this movie that's going to be shot, and she is very excited about it because it is a queer movie movie, and her and her best friend are both queer, so they're very excited that this thing is happening in their town. But then she finds out who one of the lead actresses is, and it turns out she has a particular history with that actress. However, when that actress gets to town, she doesn't immediately clock her as the person that she met 18 years ago, and the story progresses from there. This was cute and messy and lovely, and I've enjoyed everything I've ever read by this author, and I'm really excited to see where the rest of the series goes. Next we have Magpie Murders, which is very interesting because at the start of it, we are getting the perspective of this person who is supposed to be editing a book, and then we get the majority of that book, and then we find out that the last couple of chapters are missing, and now she needs to solve a real-world mystery in order to solve the mystery that we've been trying to solve the whole time while reading the book. And it turns out that the author of the book that she is reading and that we are reading through her also draws a lot of inspiration from people they know in their actual life, so we're wondering if people are one-to-one duplicates and trying to figure out who done it in the story and then who done it outside of the story. This was a framing device that I very much enjoyed, and I really enjoyed trying to figure out both of these mysteries. Something else I listened to this month and absolutely adored listening to was The Third Gilmore Girl, which is the memoir of Kelly Bishop. Now, I've always known her as Emily Gilmore on the Gilmore Girls, but she has done so much more than that. I didn't know that she originated a character that was based on her in A Chorus Line, which is a musical I definitely know. She's also done tons of other projects with tons of other people, and this was just so much fun to listen to. She has stories for days, and I could honestly listen to her talk about her life forever. The final book on this list, and my 5-star book for this month, is The Shadow Cabinet, which is the follow-up to Her Majesty's Royal Coven. This is the second book in a series, so obviously I can't tell you too much about the specific plot. What I can tell you is I was very excited to get to this one because there is such a big plot point at the end of the first one that honestly, my jaw dropped when I read that. This one is following the same characters, but the ramifications of what happened in the first book. And what I can tell you about this world is it does take place in the UK, but it takes place in a version of the UK where witches are actually a thing and there are people that have powers. The public at large doesn't know about that, but a few people in the government do know about that because witches help mundanes, mundanes help witches. It's a whole thing. However, there are some people in the UK government that seem to have some opinions about what's going on in the coven, and that definitely becomes an issue. Let me just leave it there. This one also had some reveals at the end of it that I went, okay. So again, excited to read the next book in this series, and then once I've read that, there's also a prequel book that I will also eventually get to. As for the prompts for Read Queer All Year, this is what they were, and I read a book for each of them. For Indigenous Rep, I read Ready When You Are. For Transparent Rep, I read Love Lives Here. For Disability Rep, I read Floating Hotel. And for Middle Grade, I read Camp QUILTBAG. As for my bingo board from hell, I got a bingo. This is what the board looks like now. I've got that diagonal bingo because I finally did the emoji read. I just needed to read one book based on one emoji that somebody gave me, and it turns out I got this emoji months ago from Luna, and then I was saving it specifically so I could use this emoji for my roommate from hell, which I knew I had an arc of. As for the squares on this board that I haven't actually finished yet, I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish any of them in December. There's one that I'm particularly going to try, and then the other ones that I'm just like, that's probably not gonna happen. But who knows? If you want to hear me talk more about these books or other books for that matter, the playlist for my weekly entertainment wrap-ups is always linked down below. Have you read any of these, or are you now planning to read any of these? Let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down in the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment, but you want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!